Hello, and welcome to another episode of Generally Speaking. I'm your host, Bill Lawrence. Today is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. What's going on these days? Well, we've got the farmers still hurting because of China not buying anything anymore from us because of the tariff wars that are going on. We need a little more um, control over some of these big items like food. This society needs food. There should be some oversight. The idea, the capitalist society, the free market, everybody does whatever they want, doesn't work out all the time. I mean, it does have some good points, but it also can cause a lot of problems. There should be the kind of mixed economy. That's what China does. They have some oversight, especially over the big important things, but even those, they let the regional branches, the smaller city branches, have their make their own decisions. It's a good idea. We should do that more here. All right, what Trump posted an AI video of himself as a fighter pilot flying over the King No King's protesters, demonstrators, and he's wearing a crown. So there he is. I'm a king, and the jet is dropping feces all over the crowds. So I mean, it's disgusting as it is. That's just typical for Trump. If there was nothing else you could say about Trump, why anybody would vote for a person like that is beyond me. Now I speak with some people. I try to get it out of them. It's hard talking to them because they just get into arguments. But one was saying, well, he took care of immigrants. That was very important, and the trans thing. I don't want my little girl getting run over by some big bruising guy that thinks he's a girl. And so like the immigration thing, nobody thought about it all until it became big in the news. These people, all their beliefs come from what other people tell them to believe. That's all that is. Not one of them had any personal experience. And the kids in the schools, right? What's that? The 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 of 1%, where that even exists anywhere. And then, okay, look, that's important to you. More important than someone trying to overthrow the Constitution, more important than someone trying to take over the country as a dictator, you know, more and more trying to take away your right to speech. You can't criticize Israel. That's more important. Well, what can you do? That's where they come from. I used to think, everybody was pretty much, normally intelligent and, recognizing, of course, that, some people are brilliant, like that Goodwill Hunting, does 5,000 mathematical calculations in 1 second. Yeah, sure. Can't everybody divide 776,222 by 336 and get the answer 225? Doesn't everybody do that? Yeah, all right. And then you got people on the other side of the spectrum, that are a little slow. But even with this spectrum, people still have, brains. They still have brains. But I don't think that anymore. I think some of them don't. All right. So we got that AI video, pretty disgusting. What's next? We got I think I was watching this guy lately about animal stories. Things like, the biggest cow. Oh, a big cow. What's a big cow? Well, let's say a bovine. Let's not say a cow. This thing's like 7 feet high at the shoulders, runs 30 miles an hour, and it's nothing but pure, unadulterated muscle. And he was talking about a fish, the barracuda. These guys can swim 40 miles an hour. I didn't think fish could get through the water at 40 miles an hour. At any rate, this thing is really vicious. He calls it a swimming delete button. I thought that was funny. The Barracuda. So, how about this one? Nestle is looking to cut 16,000 jobs over the next 2 years. Now, up front, I hear Nestle going to quit jobs, to cut jobs, 2,000 jobs. Companies do. They hire, they cut, they hire, they cut. Stability isn't like a guarantee working for a company. And then I heard that it's over 2 years, and I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Over 2 years, that's not so bad. People have time to prepare, get ready. My job might be going soon. 2 years of notification, but it's another thing again where how much a particular town, because usually Nestle is a big company. They're almost the whole company in the town. How many people suffer when these companies close down? There's nothing in this society preparing people for what they're going to do when the job that they've invested all their time and energies and life into, and that's their skill set, and it goes away. And now, what do? It's not like, well, Nestle's closing. I'll just go over to Hershey, which is across the street. No, Hershey isn't there, and there's no chocolate anymore. And so, well, I'll go work for the nuts and bolts company. What's your experience? Well, I poured chocolate. It doesn't really help me in the nuts and bolts company. There should be some more something or other to take care of people when they get kicked out of jobs. And so that's just what I think about that. What do we got there? Next thing. So this animal guy again in Florida, there are, alligators, there are pythons now, and there's all other kinds of animals. But who would have thought there were monkeys? Monkeys, Reese's macaques monkeys to be exact. Somebody introduced them. That's where so many of these animals just show up from. Somebody says, let's throw a few of these in there, throw a few of them. So now there's roughly 600 monkeys in Florida. And just be careful if you see them because they're not friendly. All right, this comes from a fellow named Owen Jones. Has to do with soccer and it has to do with politics. The we call it soccer, they call it football, but there's a team called Maccabi Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv actually has a couple of soccer teams. It's not uncommon for a single city to have a couple of soccer teams, and when the teams from a same city play together, it's called a derby. They all seem to be pronouncing it Derby. At any rate, the Maccabi fans, it turns out, tend to be very hostile. And there was a game in Amsterdam last year where the Maccabi fans were conducting riots through the streets. And the thing about it was then how the media and the government was trying to talk about how people were attacking the Maccabees, this anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, it was the Maccabee fans that were destroying everything. And well, now we come to today, and there's a game going in Birmingham, London, Birmingham, not London, Birmingham, England, and the authorities have decided, you know what, we're not going to allow any Israeli Maccabee fans into the game. So if you want to come from Israel, you got your Israeli passport. We know you're from Israel. We're not going to let you into the game. And there was all this ruckus from the politicians and, some regular people in the streets. But the important focus here is the politicians who are calling this anti Semite again. And now I've got to wonder, back to this thing where I was saying about how I think people are intelligent. When you're against genocide, all right, if you're against the country of Israel doing whatever it's doing, and then people say, well, you're an anti Semite, you are either just outright lying and you're just looking for an excuse and you're making up a stupid one because it's so evidently not connected that either you're a moron or you're hateful, you're evil. And so here these Maccabee people are fans from Israel, not from England. England fans, okay, are being told they can't come, and the people in the parliament are. This is a big issue for them. This is the most important thing for them. Who's attending a soccer game. There's nothing else in their country. Everything is so fine. But this is what they're debating, and I'm listening to debates, and you hear these people talking about how this is anti-Israel, this is anti-Semites, and it's the plain thing is that no, we are for security. These Maccabee fans run riot, and what's evidence of it in Tel Aviv itself? The Maccabee fans went so wild, throwing flares onto the field, onto the playing field and starting chaos and trouble that the game got called off in Tel Aviv because of the Maccabee fans. So what they did last year in Amsterdam, what they just did in Tel Aviv in Israel, yeah, it's a good call not to let them into Birmingham. But yet these idiots are still fighting against it. And I really can't understand. Are they genuine? Are they genuine? And it's which case they're really messed up in the head, or they're just that evil. either way, it's messed up. So that was Owen Jones, a really good presenter of things British. This one from the Friendly Atheist podcast is mentioning how if you want to be an election worker in South Carolina, you have to go through some procedures, training, blah, 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 sign papers. And one of the papers you have to sign is an oath. Like you got to send an oath. What's the point of oaths? I sent an oath and then I just did what I wanted anyway. Does the oath now restrict you? Like, say you won't tell a lie. You try to tell a lie and I can't tell a lie. I said that oath. Am I? No, no. So the oaths are ridiculous. All right. But at any rate, they got to say this oath. And at the end of the oath are the words, so help me God. And this fellow said, listen, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in Christian God because God means Christian God. All the other religions, call them whatever they call him, Allah. Okay, all right, and Yahweh. So, any rate, he didn't want to say it. So he said, "Listen, can I do this without saying that?" They said, "No, you have to say that." Why? 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 This is more. There's something in people that's like a piece of steel or iron that's messed up in their head where they are forced to do things that they don't have to do, totally unnecessary, and yet they're stuck with they have to do this. This is why wars happen. This is why, because you've got people like this. I mean, I see Karen videos, those women that show up out of nowhere suddenly complaining about, how your dog is walking on the leash, and they start yelling in your face and they want to start, pushing you. This is what these people are. They got these mindsets where this has to be. It's got to be. So, at any rate, they're getting sued. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, along with the other usual suspects that join in on these things, said, "Listen, we're going to sue you if you don't do this. We've already won in Louisiana and Alabama, which had the exact same issue, saying that you have to say in God, yes, and would not just say, oh, sorry, our bad. We'll just take that out." No, they wanted to fight it. And so, these organizations told South Carolina, you're going to lose this. And South Carolina says, we don't care. No, no, we got to stand by this. I don't get it. Look, you like your religion. Okay, fine. But we live in a world where there are people who aren't, and we all have to get along. And so, any rate, that was from the Friendly Atheist. Great guy. This one is from a fellow, Sean Fu. Sean, a nice Irish name, but he's not Irish. He's Asian, and I think he podcasts from China, as a matter of fact. So he's talking about China's purchase of U.S. Energy, which comes down to being coal, oil, and liquid natural gas. They're having a big war with the United States with these tariff things, and they decide, we're not going to buy your energy anymore. And so, what kind of change, what kind of reduction? Well, from last month ago, it was they bought $1 billion a month. Now they're buying zero, from 1 billion to zero. Have you noticed the price of gasoline gone down lately? That's because now the oil companies are stuck with all this oil. And, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we should thank Trump, Hey, there you go. You did something good. I don't think that was his plan. And I don't think the oil companies are really happy with that plan. But you know what? Screw them. That's what I say. So I don't know if I'm happy or sad about this. All right. So at any rate, things on the world market. So anyway, we got this going on. What's U.S. doing? They're pressuring Japan to drop their Russian energy purchases. Now, Japan doesn't buy most of its gas, oil from Russia, but it's got a nice chunk, something like 10, 15%. And they're already kind of operating on a margin. Apparently, they're in some economic straits. It's funny how many places are in economic straits. It's almost like they're always in economic straits. I think the Norwegian countries, they always seem to be okay for some reason. But everyone else in the world is always in economic straits. What is so hard about balancing your budget? What's so hard? Corporations don't want to pay any taxes. That's what's so hard. And they have no consideration for the rest of society. So, one thing about China, they think about the whole society. And well, that's because they have the guns that will tell the corporations, you don't do what we say, we shoot you, we'll disappear you. And I can't approve of that, not one way, shape, or form. And even if they have a lot of good things in China, that's not worth it. Charlie Kirk was saying it's worth a couple of deaths every now and then in order to keep your gun rights. I see his argument, but look at that. He's dead now, and if he's true to his word, he would say, "Listen, I still feel that way, right?" But I don't think I'm going to go there with the rights that we lose, our right to free speech, especially just so we can have our society all peachy clean. I think we should be able to do good and keep our free speech. And that's the way you should work on it. It's one thing that they all seem to have a problem with? They all have a homeless population somewhere. I was watching a thing on Japan. It looks squeaky clean. Everybody looks dressed up nice and everything. But they've got issues in their society. People work. We think we're workaholics. They make us look like goof offs. They work so hard. But meanwhile, they do have a homeless population. They're hidden, though. They're off on the side. They don't have tent cities in the middle of town. They've got sections of town where it's all kind of like slumland. But you know what? It's still, even though it is, the Japanese, they're so nice. They're not like shooting up drugs, and it's not like it's unsafe to be there. It's just poor people, man, down and out. A lot of them old senior citizens, just sitting over like a can of garbage with some flame going, trying to keep warm. I always wonder, how does it that they got these things called the Yakuza, the crime gangs? Like every country has its crime gang. The society there is, for the most part, they got respect. They're all about respecting your elders, respecting each other, and yet you still have criminals. What makes for that element to happen? All right, what's going on? French credit rating has been cut for the third time. It happened to us. We got our credit rating cut not too long ago over concerns about our budget, whether we're going to be able to balance it. And it's shocking. The United States credit rating being dropped. Well, its credit rating has been dropped for the third time in recent times. So it's not like over the last 10 years. Something within the last year or so dropped third times. Their debt to GDP ratio, how much they keep owing compared to how much the whole country makes, is like 114%. 114%. How can you owe more than you make? Something doesn't seem like it's going to work here. Well, the United States is in that boat, except ours, instead of 114, is 120. We owe 120% more than what we make. And in your and my world, that would be pretty quick disaster. But when you're a country, things aren't quite exactly the same. So China is cutting rare earths to the United States, and the United States, everybody needs rare earths. Almost everything you have, electronics, structural, buildings, cars, automobiles, planes, they all have rare earths. And China, and they exist everywhere. They're all over the place. It's just that they're hard to get out of the ground, and they're hard to process, and they're very polluting when you do process it. And China has been focused on it for a long time. They've got it down. They know how to process it without the pollution, and they do it efficiently. And so the United States is thinking, we want to buy it from Australia, saying, hey, we got plenty of rare earths. Come buy it from us. Won't really help anything because it's not the rare earths itself. The United States has rare earths. Rare earths aren't rare. They're kind of common. Why they're called rare, I don't know. But it's like the processing part, having the plants that can process it. That would take years for us to build that up. All right, so this is from a site called Legal AF. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals blocked a judge who said Trump can't put these troops in Chicago or Portland, one of those places. Said she can't put the troops there. And there's no war going on. There's no wildness that you would be justified to put them in there. Well, of course, Trump appeals it, goes to the appeals court, and the appeals court says we're going to side with Trump. And this is like unbelievable because the whole justification for him doing what he's doing isn't there. there's none of what he says is there. But so what are these judges that said it was okay? What did they base it on? It says, well, presidents, know what they're doing. And when it comes to military stuff, we should really defer to what the president wants because it's military stuff. And so what the commenter was saying, so what were we saying? This whole idea of rules about when you can deploy the military, just throw them out the window. Don't mean anything. Don't need any rules. So, at any rate, the judge who got stomped on said she wants a full meeting of the judges. Like when it was sent to the appeals, there are lots of judges in a circuit, and in the Ninth Circuit there are 20 something. And but meanwhile, the case comes up. It doesn't go between all 20. It goes to like a select few in the neighborhood, and so only three looked at the case and told the first judge, "Yeah, you're wrong. Trump can do what he wants." So now she's saying, "Listen, I want all the judges to weigh in on this, and I wanted to do it quick because we're talking about troops in the streets now. The troops in the streets, they're good and they're not so good. I was watching a thing, a video. Don't know how much faith to put in it. And it was, I think, Mississippi, where he recently just sent some troops who nobody hears anything about that. And someone was saying, I've been looking at the numbers. There was a black person and saying, and the numbers they've recovered, 20 missing children that were abducted somewhere, and they've been taking out the criminals, and now everything is safe. And I really like the troops being here, and forget Democrats. I'm going to vote for Republican from now on. So I don't know what the statistics are about that, but I'll tell you, I'm a reasonable person if I'm anything. And when something works, I'm for it. And if the troops are doing good, number one, I say, all right, that's good. But on the other hand, I say it's still illegal. It's unconstitutional. If you like that result, get some more money for having more law enforcement to do the things that they're doing. Now, I might question whether all those statistics, the numbers that this guy is talking about, are legitimate or not, considering when the president hears numbers he doesn't like, he fires the person that said the numbers and said, "You, come here. I want you to give out these numbers." When you get a person like that says, "Listen, I'll tell you what numbers to put out, and you put out those numbers," you got to wonder if his numbers are right. That was number one. Number two, I commented. I say, listen, you might be happy now, you black people in your poor neighborhoods, and I know there are black people who are rich in rich neighborhoods, but this is where this person was coming from. And I'm saying, yeah, sure, this law looks good right now until his real estate buddies start thinking, we could put a few houses, a few complexes, a few golf clubs in your neighborhood. You're out of here. You'll be gone in 2 seconds. It'll make your head spin. If you think they're pro-black, if you think Republicans are pro-black, you ought to listen to some of those text messages that young Republicans were just talking about, the N-word, this, that, and the other thing. How about those men that committed suicide recently on a tree? You think they committed suicide? No. And I'll bet I can tell you what political party the people that hung them were. Of now, listen, nobody knows they were hung or not. There was no story ever came out about it. So if they would have been hung, it would have been Republican. That's who would have done it. So I'm telling them, you got these troops coming in here. These guys are wolves in wolves' clothing. Because they are wolves and they're not really hiding it. Maybe you think it looks good now. They're just testing the waters. They're getting their feet wet, seeing what works and what doesn't. At any rate, I say if the law enforcement thing did the good things, let it work through local authorities the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to have military troops doing stuff in our streets. All right. What else? We got a young lady named Monte Mader. She's really good. She's talking about a bill has just recently been introduced to deny passports to anyone, American citizens. You want to go to some place out of the country, another country, you need your passport. They're going to deny it to you if they think you've said anything bad about Trump. So, half the population doesn't like what he's doing. If you said anything bad, we can take away your passport. And they, of course, they don't put it like if you said something bad. They said if you're supporting a terrorist organization, which means if you're with Antifa, and which means if you said anything bad. So, like, that's where it all comes down to. And that's what they're proposing. And these are the guys that you support. Don't go voting Republican. You're in looking for trouble. All right. This guy now, Hawk podcast. Love him. He's good. He was talking about a fella, and actually, what he does a lot is he reposts other people's posts. He does good surfing around the web, sort of like me, and but he does a better job of presenting. And he was showing this one woman who was talking about a fella named Curtis Yarvin. Never heard of him, but apparently he's one of these big mouth ideologues, talking about how everything should be in the country. And well, okay, but no, there's more to it. He happens to be someone that our vice president, J.D. Vance, looks up to. His number one guy, his guru. I want to be like this guy. We need more of him. All right, so what about him? These are his words. He says, we need the liquidation of democracy, liquidation of the Constitution, liquidation of the rule of law, followed by the transfer of power to the CEO in chief that would transform the government into a heavily armed, ultra profitable corporation that could retire all government employees, which that's the thing. It's called rage, retire all government employees. And they don't mean retire like you've done a good job, son, girl, and here, you deserve a rest. Here's your pension. Have a nice retirement. No, retirement like we don't need you anymore. Uh, Here's your 2 weeks pay, and think of whatever you're going to do because I'm not interested. And on top of all those, let's kill the press and let's incarcerate decivilized populations. And who's decivilized? Well, probably anyone who isn't white, and probably who isn't male, and of course anyone who doesn't agree with the government. And this is who JD Vance puts on a pedestal. Ugh, can't believe it. All right, last thing. I love that podcast. Jennifer Welch and her co-partner, name slips me at the moment. I'm not don't really have a story from them, but they had a title on their article, playing off that movie, The Devil Wears Prada, and their title was The Devil Wears MAGA, and I thought that was very funny. So there you go. There's things going on today. Nothing much new, of course. Israel still bombing the Palestinians, and and everything else. The courts are still going to decide on a case that came up from Louisiana about the Voting Rights Act, whether you can discriminate against blacks so that they don't have any say in the election. You cut up their district, so there's no way they can possibly elect somebody they want. And it's interesting. They talked about it's okay if you're talking about political affiliation. You can do gerrymandering. I'm just saying why there shouldn't be any gerrymandering. There's ways to divvy things up as even as possible. I mean, there's always some debate about it should be this way, it should be that way, but there's out and out trying to steal, and then there's doing your best, to try and make it as even as possible, and that is the way it should be. So, but at any rate, there you go. There's all the news that's going on. I hope you liked it, subscribe, and hit the notify bell. And I hope you look for me again. Generally speaking, have a nice day.